What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Past the Spread. I am your host, Olivia Moody, joined by Nick Yahl and Jeff Parles. Thank you, fellas, for being here. We've got some things to talk about, basketball related, because March does seem to be the month of basketball, which for me is like the best thing ever. So let's start with a little NBA. We are starting back tonight with NBA. We had a little all-star break there, where I try to dabble in some other sports. Quickly made me realize NBA is my go-to. So I'm super thrilled. We've only got 2 games on the slate. The Wizards are a 3-point dogs at the Memphis Grizzlies with a total of 237, and the Mavs are 4-point favorites at home against the Spurs with a total of 226. Do you guys want to bet on this game? If so, which side are you on? What do you guys like tonight? Nick, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm staying away from the Dallas game. Dallas San Antonio is kind of a crapshoot in my book. You never really know which team you're going to get with Dallas. You don't know if they're going to come out and play hot or if they're going to shit the bed. So I'm going to stay away from that Dallas game. Look at the Wizards one, though. A healthy Brad Beal, I like the Wizards as an underdog. Now, the last time these two teams played, the Grizzlies had 7 guys in double figures for points. So Washington needs to play some defense. We'll see if that happens. I think this total is a little bit high. I'm going to stay away from the totals, though, because they have not been very kind to me. I tend to try to bet the under, and then the overs hit. So staying away from there, but I am going to take the Wizards as the dog against the spread, not on the money line.
I hate that I agree with you today, Nick. I really hate it. It actually drives me nuts. But I'm with you. I said as well, I was going to go to Jeff next, but I'll just say this. I definitely can't get a read on Dallas. So I'll give my pick once Jeff goes, but I am staying away from the Mavericks tonight and probably forevermore. Jeff, what do you like tonight?
Steer clear of that Dallas San Antonio game. I have no feel for it. Really, I don't have much of a feel for the other game either, but since we're in the business of at least giving some takes here on Past the Spreads. Of course, for our new audience on Twitch, we have to come out with takes here today, Liv. So I'll go with the over here. I know it's a gigantic number, but Memphis has been playing over games recently. We know the Wizards are a big over team, even with huge totals. So I'll go over to 237.5 in this game, or 237. There's no hook on there yet, at least. But I'll go over on that. And just hope that no one's playing defense out of the All-Star break, and hopefully everyone's mind is still in Miami, since it seemed like a third of the league was there on vacation this past week.
Ooh, I don't know if that's a good thing, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't bet totals a ton, Jeff, but I did once, and it was a sweater. I think it hit by 1 point, and so it was kind of fun because I don't do it very often, but it takes a lot to convince me about going for the total. So I'll ride it out with you, but I would prefer to stay away from them. I am taking a look at that Grizzlies-Wizards game. They are still out Grayson Allen, while Wizards have a pretty healthy roster, and the Wizards are 10-7 covering the spread on the road. So I'm taking the dogs to cover tonight. Wizards +3. Like I said, I'm not touching Dallas with a 10-foot pole, so I'm staying away from that one, but that is what I like there. Let's look at futures markets for our Book It or Cook It segment here on Past the Spread. Let's start with the Bucks to win the Eastern Conference at +375. Milwaukee is currently sitting at 3rd in the East with a record of 22-14. Book It or Cook It, Nick, let's start with you.
I love that number at +375, but I'm going to cook this one because I do have futures bets out on Philly and Brooklyn to win the overall, to win the NBA championship. And to me, in a 7-game series, while Giannis is, arguably one of the best players in the league, definitely a perennial MVP candidate, I do think that in a 7-game series, Brooklyn and Philadelphia are just too deep in their respective teams that in a 7-game series they'll be able to pull through. I don't think the Bucks can compete with Brooklyn, especially even if they get a little bit out of Blake Griffin. Not sure what they're going to get, but Brooklyn, finally, these guys have figured out what their roles are. So I'm going to cook that one.
I have to ask, Nick, you said you had futures bets on the 76ers, which I think for a long time was looking really sharp. I do want to know your thoughts a little bit on the Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid potentially being out for the next few games, because I would argue these next few games are pretty important in terms of where they're going to rank in their respective conference. And so I hope the fade was worth it. That's my first point. Second of all, do you have any doubts or concerns if they are out for an extended period of time?
Not really, because like you said, the seeding will make a little bit of a difference. Pretty tight atop the East there. Who gets the 1, the 2? But when it comes down to it, they're a playoff team. They're going to be in the playoffs, and once they get there, they'll be ready to go. I think teams will be healthy by the time playoff times comes around. So even if they're missing a few games here at the start of the second half, they'll still be good down the stretch.
Nick is sticking to his futures bet. I love it. Jeff, let's get your thoughts here on the Bucks sitting at plus 375. Book it or cook it.
To remember this, to win the East, big disclaimer there, because if you were doing plus 375 and to win the title, not good. But to win the East, I'll cook it, even though I think that number is perfectly fine. I'm kind of in the same boat as Nick of they're pretty clearly number 3 to me in the Eastern Conference. And look, Embiid's probably just going to miss the first game back against Chicago. Simmons likely will just miss the game against Chicago and then the game against the Wizards. It's not like those are great opponents anyway. And if they lose to the Bulls without both of them, so be it. They still should be able to handle Washington, assuming Joel is back on Friday. And I like Brooklyn better. I mean, look, I don't know how much Blake Griffin has left in the tank, but he's still going to be a pretty solid bench piece for them. And as Nick said, everyone has gotten their role, and they've gone on this hot streak without Kevin Durant even playing. So I think the Nets are pretty clearly ahead of Milwaukee. Philadelphia is ahead of Milwaukee. So I would not bet this. So I'd cook it on Milwaukee. I think they're going out in the second round for the second straight year.
I will say I think this COVID stuff has made it a very interesting year to bet on the NBA because you don't know, are the star players going to be out? There is that risk that at the drop of a hat, they won't be there and they won't be there for an extended period of time. So I hope you're right, Jeff, that we'll only see them out for a couple games and they'll be back in there. Next up, we've got the Phoenix Suns, who are currently second in the West with a record of 24-11. Chris Paul and Devin Booker were both all-stars, and the Suns have won 8 of their last 10. I don't know if you want to call that a hot streak, but it kind of sounds like it is. Phoenix is currently 12-1 to win the West. Book it or cook it. Jeff, let's start with you this time.
So Phoenix it's amazing that the All-Star break happened, and if I asked basically anyone who's watching this stream, unless if you are fully up on it, who's number 2 in the West right now on March 10th? I guarantee you if I asked 10 people that probably 2 of them would say Phoenix right now. They're red hot, 8 of their last 10, as you said, Liv. 2 All-Stars. Chris Paul has just changed the culture there, building on that great run they had last year in the bubble, 8-0 and no playoff appearance. I'm still mad about that, even though we're months and months past it. I would actually book it at this number. I think that number is only going to get shorter as we go along because I anticipate Phoenix staying in the top 4 in the Western Conference. I think the big question mark is, will the Nuggets be able to catch them or not? And even so, if they aren't, a 4-5 series with Denver and Phoenix, I think would be wildly entertaining and one of the better series that we could get out West. But look, I trust Chris Paul's leadership. If Booker gets healthy, which it looks like there was a video today that Phoenix tweeted at, the Suns tweeted out that Booker was practicing. So it looks like it was just maintenance why he missed the All-Star game more than anything. I would book it on Phoenix, even at, again, 12-1 is the smallest number that you've seen on Phoenix recently, but I only think it's going to get shorter. This might be the best number left you see throughout the year. So I would book it on Phoenix to win the West at 12-1.
I agree with you, and I think it makes you wonder with the All-Star game. I know there was a little bit of controversy on, is it worth it this year with all the COVID stuff and the injuries? Would they rather stay healthy? Devin Booker might have been onto something there. I'm not saying that's why he did it. I'm just saying might have been a smart move. Nick, are you booking it or cooking it for the Suns to win the West?
12-1, we'll definitely book that because, again, this is to win the West, not the NBA championship. So I think this is a great spot for them. The Lakers have shown that they are pretty much nothing without Anthony Davis. They should have him back for the playoffs, which will make a massive difference. And the Jazz have shown they can be beat. The Jazz, they're a great three-point shooting team, and they have Rudy Gobert down there on the inside to rebound the ball well and kick it back out. But once playoff time comes, you can game plan for that. And I think teams are going to be able to game plan even for when Anthony Davis comes back. So this is a Phoenix team that is the most, to me, in my eyes, the most complete team in the West. And at 12-1, that's a great number.
You mentioned the Lakers. That brings me to my next point. Let's move to the NBA championship market and take a look at the 2 favorites right now, the Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers. Listen, I get it. We're going to have Anthony Davis back, whatever. I still don't understand how the Lakers are favorites. I just don't get it. But that's just my personal opinion. Maybe I have some beef. I'm not sure. But the Nets are currently sitting second in the East, and the Lakers are third in the West. Brooklyn is the favorite at plus 250, and the Lakers are plus 275. Which team are you booking, and which team are you cooking with these two favorites? Nick, let's start with you.
Based on what I just said, we'll cook the Lakers because even with Anthony Davis, again, I think they're a little bit susceptible. LeBron isn't getting any younger, and his minutes restriction isn't getting any lighter. He's out there playing, and regardless of what he says, he will be tired at that point late in the season. He's still going to do his LeBron things, but in a 7-game series, it's hard for me to look the Lakers right now at this moment and say, yeah, they can go up and compete against a Brooklyn team who I have no doubt in my mind at this point is going to win the East, and how deep they are and the amount of scores that they have on that team. And again, if Blake Griffin even gives them a little bit defensively or offensively on the side of the ball, they're looking good right now. They've finally figured out where they fit. Kyrie has figured out his role. James Harden is cooking, and Kevin Durant is getting healthy. So when Brooklyn is healthy, they're the best team in the league. It's not just a big three anymore. It's a super team. This is an all-star team that teams are having to go up against in a 7-game series. That's going to be very hard to compete against.
And there's rumor has it we've got the Blake Griffin conversation for the Nets. I think that makes them a really, really dangerously talented team, which they already are. But you kind of have to wonder as well with the Lakers, we may get Anthony Davis back on the court for the playoffs, but will there be that little time period where they've got to build that chemistry back up? I mean, he's been out for half the season. So some doubt there for sure on my end when it comes to the Lakers. I'd probably be cooking them as well. Jeff, between these two favorites, which one are you booking? Which one are you cooking?
Yeah, I'm oppo of you guys. I would book the Lakers at that number because if AD comes back, that number's never going to really get north of where you're at right now at plus 275. If he doesn't come back, then my whole point is screwed. But if he does come back, the Lakers should be south of 3-1 to win the title. They're the best team if Anthony Davis is healthy. With Brooklyn, as good as they look and as good as they played recently, we haven't seen this group in a playoff series. We haven't seen this group at all in the playoffs. And it's one thing to go through the Eastern Conference and win 3 playoff series against, the Knicks in a 1-8, which would be kind of funny if that happened. Then taking care of Boston, who doesn't look like themselves, and then beating either Philly or Milwaukee, and then having in the 4th series, only have to take on LeBron James and the defending champs. It's a totally different deal when going in the finals for the first time as a group. Even the Miami super team lost the first go-around against arguably the worst team they actually played in their 4 finals appearances when LeBron was in Miami. So I would look to the Lakers. If there might even be about 3-1 out there on LA out there still, I would take that as well. So I book it on the Lakers, cook it on the Nets. I still think LA should be favored over Brooklyn to win the title still.
Wow, we have a little disagreeing. I love that.
It's always good for the show when that happens.
Always good for the brand.
It is really good for the brand. I saw a really funny TikTok that our very own Mikey Over created where, he was talking about how people say, betting's easy. You got a 50-50 chance. We're seeing that right now. Which one of you is going to be right? I mean, I don't know.
I was right last week, so
it's a coin toss.
Wow. I don't even remember what it was last week.
Illinois.
Oh, yeah, you were right on that.
Nick, that just shows Nick needs to get a hobby or something. He's remembering these things, and Jeff's like, what? I don't even remember what you were right about. Nick's holding on to every little victory.
I'm doing too many media things to remember anything at this point, Liv.
We love. You're doing for those of you that don't know, Jeff Parles has his own podcast called the Parlay Cast. When does that air, Jeff?
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, live on the stream that you're watching right now will be. So awesome. 2:00 Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and then other fun things as well. So
great. Make sure you guys tune in because it's March. Lots of madness coming up.
This is March.
Which leads me to my next little segment here. Let's talk some college hoops. It is championship week in college hoops. So let's look at the futures market first for the big dance, which of course starts next week. I'm dreading it. It's like hanging over me like a gray cloud. College basketball has been a nightmare. I feel like for everybody. So at least I'm not alone. However, I want you guys to give me one team with odds longer than 25-1 to win the big dance that you think presents some value. We're all about value here at Book It Sports. So, Nick, let's start with you. Team longer than 25-1 that you see value in.
Well, I want to hear what the people have to say, too. Drop those comments in. We'll throw them up on the screen. I personally like UNC, 40-1, point guard Caleb Love. My guy, he's been playing good basketball. And when it comes down to it for UNC, they're in a league, the ACC, that has not been great this year. Duke hasn't been good. UNC themselves haven't been good. Virginia has been shaky. Georgia Tech is probably the hottest team you have right there. I picked them to win the ACC. But UNC is probably going to get somewhere about a 9-10 draw for their seeding in the tournament. And as a 10 or a 9, you get a pretty favorable matchup with either an 8 or a 7 that you can win, and then you get to the second round. Maybe if you make it out of the 32 and get to the Sweet 16, you have a shot, because especially when it comes tournament time, good coaching and veteran leadership is what is going to be needed down the stretch. UNC has a little bit of that. They do have some youngsters, got the freshman, like I mentioned, Caleb Love. But UNC at 40-1, seems like there should be good value there. I did like Kansas too, but that got inside that, below that 25-1. I think it's at 20-1 right now. So I do like Kansas to win the Big 12. Just a little short preview there on what we'll get into later, though, as well.
Jeff, team longer than 25-1 that you see value in.
Usually I'm the one who's the Mizzou grad who actually doesn't totally shill on Kansas all the time. I'm glad to see that Nick Yahl's the one who's going to get the crap from the Mizzou Mafia today.
Yeah, that's okay.
So look, I'll give you two. One of them I bet at 80-1. It's now 50-1, and I still think it presents pretty good value, is Arkansas. So Nick and I going with the two Mizzou rivals today. Eric Musselman has done a great job this year. They're playing their best basketball. They've only won 9 straight games. They've only won 12 of their last 13, where their only loss was by 4 at Cade Cunningham and Oklahoma State.
Wow.
Moses Moody has been one of the great finds in the freshman class this year for Musselman. So I think Arkansas peaking at the right time, really good offensively, much better defensively recently, actually better defensively on the metrics than offensively, kind of the same misnomer that Bama gets. But I like Arkansas at 50-1. I still think it presents value. And then Florida State at 40-1. They seem like when they are lower seeded, they are more of a threat to make a run. They're looking at a 5 right now. They have great length. The big question is, will their defense hold up? But I have a ticket on Florida State at 40-1 too. So those are the two long ones I'll give here.
I mean, you can't deny and or argue with, winning 12 of your last 13. I'm with you there. I don't know anything about that team, but I heard that and I'm like, oh, okay. You can't argue that. That's for sure. The Big Ten tournament starts today in Indianapolis. Michigan is the top seed, while Illinois is the second seed and coming in red hot. Nick, you mentioned your little victory last week. This was, some teams that we talked about. Who is your favorite bet to win the Big Ten tournament? Jeff, let's go ahead and start with you this time.
So Michigan's the favorite. Illinois is the second favorite, like you said. If you're going top of the board, I'd go Illinois. That's what I would do. Just playing better basketball. And what we learned with Illinois stomping Michigan without the Sumu last week was, you take Hunter Dickinson out of the game with a big guy, with a good big guy like Kofi Cockburn, you can beat Michigan. So Illinois has quite possibly the best player in the country to match up with Dickinson because of the physicality that Cockburn brings. So Illinois, if we're looking at the top of the board, would be my play. We're going down the board. It's March. It's Michigan State and Tom Izzo at 80-1. The problem is their road to the Big Ten title would be really difficult. They'd have to beat Maryland, Michigan, likely the winner of Purdue or of Ohio State, and then likely Illinois in the title game. That would be a wild run to the championship at 80-1. But look, at that price, it's worth a small bet. So Illinois at the top of the board, I think wins would be my bet. And then going down the board, Michigan State 80-1. I think I take a shot there, guys.
I was feeling flames out of my screen when Michigan lost. I mean, the Book It community was going absolutely nuts. And I really wasn't tuning into that game, but it made me want to, because my whole news feed was just live reaction of this brutal beat where people were losing money left and right. But I do think there's some solace in knowing you're not the only person losing. That's what's so great about Book It, is that you can get on there and feel the fury with everybody else and celebrate with everybody else. But wow, Michigan was on my timeline for quite a bit with people just exploding. So definitely that game, I think, rattled the Book It community a bit. Nick, what are you looking at here for the Big Ten?
The Michigan State's intriguing because they did go out and beat Michigan. I was watching that game, waiting for a good opportunity to live bet Michigan, and almost pulled the trigger, but didn't. So I'm glad I stayed away. But as far as the Big Ten goes, you have to go with Illinois. Illinois and Michigan are both going to be number 1 seeds in the tournament. They're the 2 best teams in the country outside of Gonzaga and Baylor right now. And it'll probably be the Big Ten championship between those two. That'd be a very exciting matchup to see, because I would like to see them play, kind of get a little bit of a preview there, maybe for something you'll see later on in the tournament. But Kofi Cockburn, if he can stay out of foul trouble, Illinois is the team to pick, because I went ahead and threw a 12-1 futures on them to win the tournament. I was kind of selling them a little bit earlier on in the season, but they're just getting so hot right now, and I would assume he was playing some excellent basketball. So I think you got to favor Illinois there. Michigan is certainly going to be a contender. I had that futures bet on them, I think 6-1. And so for the tournament, which, Michigan, again, is trending a little bit in the wrong direction, which has me a little bit worried, but still glad they lost those games during the regular season, as opposed to doing it in the tournament, where if you lose, you're done going home. But Michigan State's an intriguing bet there for Jeff. Like you mentioned, Tom Izzo coaching at this time of the year.
March, baby.
That's what it comes down to. And, it's like, that's why we have fun with it. And anything is possible. Anything can happen. And I'm sure some craziness will happen, and something wild and wacky will result in us being absolutely completely wrong. But nonetheless,
that's the beauty of March Madness.
Nick, just keep Middle Tennessee State away from Izzo and
please.
Just keep them away.
That is the beauty of March Madness, fellas. I mean, anything can happen, which I think is why it's so hard to bet on college basketball, because, a great example, which is going to lead me to my next Power 5 tournament that we're going to talk about, the Big 12. Last week, OSU took on West Virginia, and OSU was without Cunningham. And we talked about it here on Past the Spread, that West Virginia covering a 7-point spread with no Cunningham is easy money, which I think a lot of people thought that. And not only did they not cover the spread, but they lost outright as the favorite. And so anything can happen. But like I said, I just brought up the Mountaineers and OSU. Let's talk about this last Power 5 tournament, the Big 12, arguably the most fun tournament. Am I biased? Maybe. But the most fun tournament, in my opinion, mostly because I've danced at the sidelines of this tournament twice in my showgirl career, and it was absolutely electric. I will never forget Desmond Bain being fouled on the 3-point line with like 5 seconds left up against the Jayhawks. Mind you, this tournament is in Jayhawk territory. I mean, if you're from Kansas, you are there. The stands are blue. TCU's a small private school. No one's there supporting the Frogs besides the cheerleaders and the showgirls and the band. Desmond gets fouled on the 3-point line, makes it, and I think we were down by, I mean, it was close. It was obviously, we were down by maybe 2. Gets fouled on the 3-point line, makes it, and then also makes his free throw, and we upset the Jayhawks on their own territory. It was electric because, again, who knew TCU was any good at basketball at this point? It was so fun. So I'm a little biased about the Big 12 tournament. I think it's very exciting. Baylor right now is the overwhelming favorite at -150. Kansas +650. Nick, I know you talked a little bit about Kansas. We'll let you go first. West Virginia, Texas, and Texas Tech are all at +700, and OSU is 18-1. Who is your pick to win the Big 12? Nick, let's let you go first.
I looked at West Virginia. I kind of like that, but I went ahead and booked Kansas at +650 to win the tournament. I just think, Baylor should win, but I think the Big 12 is so stacked that Baylor could just as easily get tripped up and let one slip here. And again, I'll go back to the same point I made before. Comes down to coaching. Bill Self, great coach. As much as I hate to admit that, he's a good coach, and Kansas is a good basketball team. Kansas got healthy late in the season. They weren't healthy early on in the season, and that was kind of what cost them. They didn't have all of their big-time guys, and now they have them all back. And with good coaching, anything possible. +650 is good value. West Virginia, I was looking at it, but I only wanted to pick one, and so I went ahead and went with Kansas.
Jeff, it looks like you might be favoring that press Virginia. I think that you're assuming that OSU loss was just a fluky situation. Do you have faith in the Mountaineers for this one?
One thing I want to touch on before I get to there, Liv. Big thing, and I actually was nearly on the same wavelength as Nick on this, but David McCormick not playing in his Big 12 tournament is giant. And I'm kind of surprised that Kansas was 7-1 also yesterday. They're down at plus 650. I'm surprised that Kansas has seen money with McCormick not in there. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you to go bet a minus 150 favorite in the conference tournament. It's just too many crazy things can happen. So even though I think Baylor probably does win this tournament in the end, Liv, if we're talking about going down the board here, I would look to West Virginia. The concern that we saw, hey, look, when Oklahoma State's two best players are not playing in that game like they did, sometimes the mental aspect, you lose that there. You lose your mental toughness, and that's what happened to West Virginia. They lost their mental toughness in that game. Oklahoma State, the confidence with playing with Cunningham all year for those guys who were average players last year, they have taken a click up because of playing with an elite player like Cunningham. We saw that in that West Virginia game. I don't think Lightning's striking twice. I'm not sure how much Cunningham's going to be able to play in that quarterfinal tomorrow when those two meet. So West Virginia would get a crack at Baylor if they get by Oklahoma State. They should have beat Baylor the last time around. Baylor, we've seen be random in this tournament in the past. So at 7-1, I think West Virginia presents reasonable value. The only concern with them is their defense. Unlike usual Bob Huggins teams, their defense is horrible. So they're going to have to outscore you. And the one thing with playing Baylor, as we've seen, Baylor's so efficient offensively that it might be tough to outgun them.
I agree with you there. And like Nick was saying, with the Big 12 being so stacked, I think that's where West Virginia went wrong. They let their guard down, assuming without the two best players, it was an easy dub. And with the Big 12 and all that talent that we've got on every single team, you just can't do that. So that wraps up this episode of Past the Spread. As you guys can assume, it's March. We'll be talking and diving deep into the world of college hoops, which absolutely terrifies me. But nonetheless, we're going to make it happen. It's going to be great. We are all on Book It Sports, at Nick Yahl, at Jeff Parles, at Liv Moods. We are on there constantly engaging with the community and honestly relying on the community. I have to give a quick shout out at Live Locks U has been doing excellent in college basketball. So he has been someone that I've been checking out every single day just to see what his thoughts are before I make my own picks. But that's what the Book It community is all about. We've got lots of people with great insight, great value on that app in terms of betting. So fellas, thanks a lot for joining me, and we'll definitely see you guys next week for some more college hoops conversations.
Looking forward to it.
Sounds awesome.